We are continuing our explanation of the timeline by Sylvia Halpert, which is an outline in illustrated form of the Israelite nations, emphasizing the role of the 10 tribes as well as Judah in the unfolding of history and of the Israelite purpose in this history. There were two sections of the Israelite nation, the 10 tribes and Judah. Judah represents the tribe of Judah as well as Benjamin, most of the Levites, and minority representations of the other tribes. The majority of the Israelite nation were to be found amongst the 10 tribes who lost consciousness of their ancestry, they lost awareness of who they were, but nevertheless they have a role in human history to play. And this is what we are about. We have identified these 10 tribes with peoples amongst Western nations, and this is what we have proven. Our organisation, Brit-Am Hebrew Nations, proves this. We research it and we bring proof of this to the evidence of the general public. We also work towards reconciliation between the Jewish people and the 10 tribes of Israel in amongst those peoples in the West whom we identify as being Israelites. And an outline of how this situation came to pass and what its apparent purpose is what Sylvia Halpert has done in illustrated form, and we are explaining these illustrations. My name, for those who are not aware of it, is Yair Davidiy, and I am the representative of Brit-Am Hebrew Nations. I'm speaking to you from Jerusalem, the capital of Israel, and this is what we are about. We saw how the first man and woman were Adam and Eve. From them all of humanity are descended. Then there came Noah, who saved the whole of mankind. He was the second father, one could say the second forefather of the human race, through his sons Sem, Ham and Japheth. From Sem descended Abraham. Abraham was the first Hebrew. Abraham begat Isaac. Isaac begat Yaakov. Yaakov is otherwise known as Israel. Israel had 12 sons. These sons went down to Egypt. They went down to Egypt and there they increased and multiplied. The numbers who went down to Egypt, including the 12 sons of Jacob, Jacob himself and their grandchildren, were 70. 70 souls went down to Egypt, and in Egypt they increased and multiplied, and had been prophesied that they would be subjected, that they would be enslaved in Egypt for 400 years. What exactly this means is not certain, but they were there. Archaeologically, we know that there was a rulership over the Egyptian people known as the Hyksos. The Hyksos were otherwise known as the Shepherd Kings, as we are told by Josephus. The Hyksos had Hebraic characteristics. They had names like Jacob, amongst some Hebraic names, and they had cultural features such as groups who had come from Canaan. It is recognized now by archaeologists that the Hyksos originally did come from Canaan, and a combination between the Egyptian nobility who adopted Canaanite customs and Canaanite cultural features with Israelites would explain the Hyksos rule. In the Egyptian tradition, the Hyksos were a foreign people, also identified by elements from the area of Israel, from what later became the area of Israel, who had taken control of Egypt, and they had been overthrown. And that, in effect, is what happened. The Egyptian king lost his trust, lost trust in the Hebraic nation, and he decided to subjugate them and to do what he could to diminish their numbers, because he was afraid that they were liable to take over the country, and he oppressed them. Then along came Moses. Moses was a Hebrew child. He had been saved by the daughter of Pharaoh, of the king of Egypt, brought up in the palace, but he killed an Egyptian who was oppressing a fellow Hebrew, and he fled to the wilderness. In the wilderness, God appeared unto him and told him to return to Egypt and to bring the people of Israel out of Egypt. So he returned, Moses returned, and he asked that the people be let go. The king of Egypt did not want to, so 10 plagues, a series of plagues, befell the Egyptian people, till the Egyptians agreed to let them go. And that was the first Passover. That was the first feast of Passover. The Israelites went out. They went out, they crossed through the Red Sea. The sea split apart from them. The Egyptians had changed their mind and come racing after them. The Israelites passed through the sea on the dry ground. When they got to the other side, the Egyptians were still in the middle of the sea, or the pathway, coming after them, and the waters came back and drowned all the Egyptians. So the Israelites continued into the wilderness. In the wilderness they received the commandments, they received the law. The whole law of Moses, the whole of the 5 books of Moses, and all the laws there within are encompassed in the 10 Commandments. The 10 Commandments are not only specific directions, specific orders, one could say, but they also, in principle, encompass all of the rest of the law. That is, according to Nachmanides and other commentators who present a convincing case on this point. And the Israelites had received the first 2 commandments, I am the Lord your God, and you shall have no other gods before me. They had heard this from God himself. The whole of the people had heard this. There were 600,000 males between the ages of 20 and 60. They were the warriors who went out to war, in addition to the Levites, and in addition to women and children, so altogether we have a few million people at the least, and they all had heard this message. They heard it directly. They heard God himself speak to the people. The only one and only time in history when the whole of the Israelite nation bore testimony to this reality. And so this was the receiving of the law. They received the law on Mount Sinai, but it was too much for them. Moses went up into the mountain to receive details of the law. Whilst he was gone, the people fell into despair. They thought he was dead. He did not come back on the time they figured he would come back on. He was delayed, or they thought he was delayed, and in their despair they set up a golden calf, a golden bull calf, a golden bull calf. This is important because the 10 tribes later were to worship such calves when they split apart from Judah. So the people set up a golden bull calf, and the purpose of this calf was not so much to be a god in place of God. Was intended to be a replacement for Moses, an intermediary between God and the people. But nevertheless, that was at least the initial intention, but nevertheless they worshipped it and they fell apart through it, and God was angry with them and he punished them. And this was all part of the divine purpose. There were, as if to say, plan A and plan B. Plan A was that the Israelites should keep the Torah. The Israelites should keep the Torah, they should keep all of the laws, and also they should become the greatest and most powerful and most prosperous nation on earth, and that they should influence by force and by example, by exerting the blessings, through the fruit of the blessings that God would give them. They would be enabled to exert an influence upon all of humanity and to elevate humanity to a higher level. The Israelites were not prepared to do this. They were not psychologically. They were not ready for it. The time was not right. Something was wrong. So too the peoples of the world were not ready for it. So what came about was Plan B. Instead of Plan A, we had Plan B. Now we are talking in human terms because there's no such thing as far as divine providence is concerned. Everything works as if God directs it, as God directs it. It works that way. But sometimes, in order to understand it in human terms, we say there was a Plan B, in other words, initial priority, a preference of direction as to how things should go, and Plan B, which was the default situation, which is what came into effect, because later the Israelites did go into the land, they did set up a kingdom, but the 2 sections of the Israelite nation split apart. The Jewish section, the Judah, had the task of developing the law throughout its history, whereas the other section, the 10 tribes, had to become like unto Gentiles, to go down to the level of the nations, and then to evolve upwards and to bring the rest of the world with them, which in a sense is what they have done. And eventually the 2 sections will reunite, and the 2 aspects of the Israelite mission will be made into one. So this is what Moses set about to do. But this divine plan and all its details is what Moses imparted to us. Thank you very much. May the Lord God of Israel bless you.